Well, bless the Most High. We greet you in the mighty name of Yeshua, and we're going to be looking at the subject of Hanukkah. Since we are in the season of Hanukkah, find that it's important that we share on this topic. What I'd like to do is to talk about the definition of Hanukkah, what Hanukkah means. Also, we'd like to talk a little bit about the event that marked the celebration of Hanukkah and the significance of Messiah and Hanukkah, or how Hanukkah points to the Messiah. Now, in defining the word Hanukkah means dedication or rededication. There are some who, when they may hear the word Hanukkah, the first thing that comes to their mind, since they might not know anything of Hebraic significance or Jewish significance, they might say, well, oh, that's a Jewish Christmas. No, it's not a Jewish Christmas. It is the dedication of the temple in Jerusalem. So the dedication of the temple in Jerusalem occurred in 164 BCE. The event that marked the dedication or rededication of the temple was a situation that posed a threat to the existence of the people of Judah. And this threat came as a result of the Grecian king Antiochus Epiphanes, who was ruling the Greek Empire during that particular time, and he was from the region that the Seleucids had control over, and that particular area included the land of Israel, Judah in particular. And Antiochus wanted all of his realm to be Greek cultured and to worship the gods of the Greeks. He posed a threat to the existence of the people of Judah, the Jews during that time, unless they assimilated with the Greek culture, worshiped their gods, and became basically Greeks in lifestyle. And what was going on during this time among many Jews that were living either in the land of Israel or even outside the land of Israel, for there were many Jews that were living in other parts of the Greek Empire, they were acclimating themselves to the Greek lifestyle. Many of the men were having themselves to become uncircumcised. They were practicing the ways of the Greeks. They were involving themselves even in their sports and Olympic games, where they would practice these games in the nude. So anyway, they decided that serving the true and the living God, Yahweh Eloheinu, was not for them. And when Antiochus decided that he wanted that small region in his empire that had not come under the guidelines of the Greek way of life, he decided to come to the temple of Jerusalem and to desecrate it. He came into the temple with the statue of Zeus, erected it. He offered a pig upon the altar of the Most High God in the temple, and showed his defiance towards the God of Israel. Well, there was a small group of people who decided that they wanted to remain true and loyal to the worship of the Most High. They were of the family of the Maccabees. They decided to fight against the armies of the Greeks. Now, mind you, the numbers that the Grecian army had was overwhelming in comparison to the small guerrilla bands that the Maccabees had formed. However, the power and the might of Almighty God was on the side of the Maccabees and pushed the Greek armies out of Judah, where they were able to recapture the temple and clean it out and began the process of rededicating the temple. Now, in the process of rededicating the temple, after they had cleaned it out, set everything in order, they had to light the menorah, the 7-branch candlestick. Well, there was a problem that they had, because they only had enough oil for one day's lighting. However, with this 1 day's amount of oil, it did not stop them from their zeal to perform the service in the temple so that worship can commence. See, worship and the serving of the true and living God was here at the heart of those loyal people that were there in the land of Israel, that chose not to assimilate into the culture of the Greeks, but to remain true to the Most High God. Now, when they took that 1 day's supply of oil and zealously put it in the lamp and burned the oil, a miracle occurred, because that oil lasted 8 full days, enough time for them to be able to manufacture enough oil so that they can continue the lighting of the menorah by pouring in the oil and keeping it lit. For you see, the menorah in the temple had to be lit 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it was significant that they had enough oil that would last. And God, in his providence, seeing the situation and honoring their zeal, worked a miracle so that that 1 day's supply of oil would last 8 full days. What a miracle. Another thing that we need to look at with regard to this particular event of Hanukkah, the dedication, or rededication of the temple, has to do with the power of God's providence. How God preserved his people to preserve his promise. He preserved his people to preserve his purpose. Now, while all Israelites all over the world, whether they believe in Yeshua the Messiah or not, regard Hanukkah as significant because it marks the preservation of the people in the land of Yehudah. Yet for us who believe Yeshua HaMashiach, Yeshua from Nazareth, as being the Messiah of Israel, for us, we find it very significant from a prophetic point of view. In the scriptures, we're told that the Messiah would come from the tribe of Judah. We're told over in Genesis chapter 49, the 10th verse, when Jacob was blessing his sons before he was about to pass on to go by way of the grave to be with God, he laid his hands upon Judah and spoke a blessing over him. It was a prophecy, and he said that the scepter would not depart from Judah, neither the giver of Torah, the lawgiver, from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. Now, this prophecy gives us the information of the Messiah not only coming, but coming specifically from the tribe of Judah. But then there's another prophecy. Let's look at the prophecy noted in Micah. I want to look at Micah chapter 5. I want to look at the 2nd verse. Bear with me for a moment as we get to Micah chapter 5. And we want to look at the 2nd verse. In this verse it says, "But you, O Bethlehem, Ephratah, who are one of the little clans of Judah. From you shall come forth for me one who is to rule in Israel, whose origin is from old, from ancient days. Now here in these two verses we find very specific information that the Messiah, the King of Israel, would come from the tribe of Yehudah. Now let's backtrack just a moment, and let's connect this to what we've been discussing as it relates to the threat of annihilation upon the people of Judah during 167 through 164 BCE. We find here that this threat had come at a time when the people were back in the land of Israel. And here comes this threat of annihilation and assimilation. Now, we see that God actually began preserving this promise of the Messiah coming through the tribe of Judah way back with the dispersions. When we go back to 722 BCE, the tribes that were in the northern kingdom, the 10 tribes, when they were taken into captivity by the Assyrians, they were scattered abroad to all the nations, all over the world, we believe, according to the word of the Most High, where he said that if you will not keep my covenant, then I will scatter you from one end of the heaven to the other among the nations. But when it came to the southern kingdom, which was Judah, when they were taken into captivity round about 596 through 586 BCE, we find that they remained in Babylon in captivity by the Babylonians. And after 70 years of captivity, they were released to go back to the land of Israel to begin a restart, a rebuilding of the temple and a reorganizing of the way of the Most High God. But all of that was done primarily to set up the situation for the coming of the Messiah. And while the Jews were there, being free from exile, the temple being rebuilt, we know when the Greeks came on the scene that the Greeks, in wanting to have the people of Judah to be assimilated into their culture, at least this was the edict of Antiochus, that God still preserved his promise. It was through the tribe of Judah that the Messiah was to come forth. So when we look at this event of Hanukkah, those of us who believe Yeshua is the Messiah, we see it not only as a great event, a time of God's providence, a time of God preserving his people, Israel, but we see it as an event that marks this preservation of the people in Judah for the purpose of bringing the Messiah into the world. Our Messiah had to come through the tribe of Judah, and if there were no Jews living in the land of Israel during that time, all according to the prophecies, then there would be no Messiah. For the prophetic word declared that the Messiah had to come through the tribe of Judah. And so this event is very significant to us, because we recognize that the Most High has preserved his people to preserve his promise. Now, something that I would like to talk about as well, for us who are believers in the Messiah Yeshua, and there are many in the world today, most of us who practice our faith from the original Hebrew perspective and understanding ourselves to be Israelites within the framework of the New Covenant, we find Hanukkah as being significant. However, there are many others who believe in Yeshua. They call him Jesus, and I don't have a problem with the use of the term Jesus. But many who practice their faith primarily from a Greco-Roman perspective, being channeled through the Catholic system, where everything just sort of branched out from, they may not find significance in the celebration of Hanukkah. But I want to draw the attention of every believer who might be listening to this that we're teaching about right now. I want to draw your attention to the scripture found in the Gospel of John, chapter 10, verse 22. Because our Messiah celebrated Hanukkah. Let's go to John chapter 10. We want to look at the 22nd verse. John chapter 10, verse 22. And here in John chapter 10, verse 22, it says, "At that time the festival of dedication took place in Jerusalem. It was winter, and Yeshua was walking in the temple in the portico or the porch of Solomon." Now you might say, well, what's significant about this verse? Well, number one, it says that Yeshua is here at the temple during the time of the Feast of Dedication. Now the word Hanukkah means the Feast of Dedication. So here Yeshua is at the temple during the time of the Feast of Dedication. Well, someone might say, well, okay, he's at the temple during that time. What's significant about that? It's very significant because Yeshua didn't just hang out in Jerusalem. Yeshua spent most of his time in northern Israel. He's from northern Israel. He grew up in Nazareth, and he spent most of his time where he was teaching and preaching and making disciples on the Shabbat in Capernaum. So most of the time that Yeshua spent in active ministry was in northern Israel. It was only during the time of the mandated Moedim that he came down to Jerusalem. Moedim being the feast, such as Passover, Pesach, or Sukkot, and also Shavuot. So the mandated Moedim, which the Torah is very clear that every male has to present himself before the Most High or at the temple, would be during the mandated Moedim. And as I mentioned, Pesach, or Passover, Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, and then the last being Sukkot, or Tabernacles, Feast of Booths. Now, the Feast of the Dedication was not a mandated Moedim. It was a holiday amongst the Jews, marking an event where God preserved his people. It was a significant event, just as Purim being a significant event, marking the preservation of the people that God had used to bring forth the Messiah into the world. And so we find Messiah in the wintertime. For Hanukkah occurs beginning on the 25th of Kislev, according to the Hebrew calendar, and it lasts for 8 days. So we find him during the time of the Feast of Dedication in Jerusalem in the winter time at the porch of Solomon. What this shows us is that Messiah regarded the Feast of Hanukkah. He regarded this event that marked the rededication of the temple, because he, being God in the flesh, knew that the preservation of the people of Judah and the preservation of the worship in the temple had to continue before his arrival. All of this had to be set in place and set in order so that when the Messiah would come, as the prophets prophesied, it said that he would come to his temple. So we know that there had to be a temple and there had to be a people in order for the Messiah to come. And when we look at this, we need to take into account that if Messiah found it significant to celebrate Hanukkah, then I believe that every believer should also find it significant to celebrate Hanukkah. You might not be Messianic, you might not practice your faith from its original Hebraic perspective, but I want to challenge and encourage every believer to celebrate Hanukkah. Your Messiah celebrated Hanukkah. There are many who say, I want to be like Jesus, walk like Jesus, talk like Jesus. And I understand the desire, and I understand the passion, I understand. But if you really want to live like Jesus, you want to live like Yeshua, you want to walk like Yeshua, you want to be like Yeshua, then I would challenge you, my believing brothers and sisters, to practice what Yeshua practiced. Celebrate Hanukkah during this season and follow in the footsteps of our Messiah, because Hanukkah is connected to our Messiah. If the celebration and the events that marked Hanukkah would have never occurred, then there would be no Yeshua that would have been born in Bethlehem. Be blessed. I trust that you have been encouraged by this teaching, and happy Hanukkah.